Good morning. I'd like to start by replying to a comment from the video yesterday on chapter 1 of the book Us, and it's a great comment. In the book, in chapter 1, Terry Real talks about the example of Dan and Julia, and that Dan has been lying all of his life because that was his adaptive mechanism from childhood because he had a strict controlling mother. And after 25 years, Julia has had enough and she's about to leave him. And someone made a very observant comment, which was, Julia picked him. Why was it okay for so long? Why did she pick him? And I love that comment because it is true. And I have taken enough of Terry Real's courses to know what usually happens is, I'm guessing the reason he didn't include Julia's part was for two reasons. Three reasons. One is that most of his work is read by women. Women are the main consumers of personal development books. They're usually the ones taking their partners into counseling, not always. And so I think to appeal to the female audience, he picked, the man as the one who had the problem. If he would have picked the woman as the one having the problem, a lot of women would automatically be like, whoa, it's always my fault, So I think to appeal to women. Number two, because in therapy, in his style of therapy, there is you want to start with the one person who's the blatant. There's usually one person who's causing the obvious problem. Sometimes both people have equal part. You can have both people have an equal role, but often you have one person who has a bigger problem, like the alcoholic. The codependent is there, but we got to address the alcoholic first. The person whose problem is on the surface. Okay, so in relational life therapy, we take sides. We start with one person whose behavior is more flagrant, more obvious, and we want to support the person who has been quieted or victimized, let's say. Okay. However, that person did choose that situation. They chose that. And so their part will be also addressed, but not immediately. Their part will come later. So I'm going to guess that Julia chose Dan because allowing Dan was all the intimacy she could handle. There's a reason she wasn't comfortable with someone who was intimate and vulnerable. Maybe she was not ever raised with that and knew it was possible. Maybe it scared her. Maybe she was never aware of that in her life. Maybe over her lifetime she changed. Maybe mothering opened her heart and made her aware that something more was possible. Maybe Dan was so charming that she fell for that, but over time his lying, and there were worse things he lied about, became a source of pain. So Julia is going to have to work on being comfortable with being intimate. And I'm guessing that Julia developed her own defense mechanisms against Dan's lying. She might have developed a sense of being a victim or of self-righteousness. She may have stonewalled and shut down rather than, she might have been yelling at him. She had her own way of dealing with it that she's going to have to address. Julia has a lot of work to do too. And finally, the third reason Julia wasn't addressed in chapter 1, in my opinion, is because there's already so much going on in chapter 1 that adding her in was probably a lot. However, I agree it would have been better if, my book has so many things that could be better. If there could have been a sentence in chapter 1 saying, and Julia chose Dan, and Julia has work to do too, and we will get to that later. But, no author is perfect. So thank you for bringing that up. Now, as a self-care practice, some of you may struggle with eating too much or not wanting to exercise. So I'm more about adding good habits. So one thing that everyone can do, two things everyone can do for self-care, you guys, is drink water. So if you just get two of these, fill these with water, and drink these throughout the day, it is an act of self-love to keep yourself hydrated. And water is basically free. You don't have to go to the gym, you don't have to buy anything, and you don't have to stop eating or break any of your bad habits. Just start drinking two of these a day. So I am big into adding things to your life rather than taking things away. Water. The second self-care practice I'm going to recommend today is breathing. A lot of people are in a constant fight or flight state. And one way you can tell if your body is stressed is check your breathing. Usually people, and I catch myself doing this, breathe shallow. Just take little breaths because we're like in a stress response, a threat response. And what will actually help your body relax is when you do slow, deep breathing. You don't have to listen to a 5-minute yoga video. Just do it anywhere. You don't have to sit in any special way. Just do slow, deep breathing. You can do it wherever you are. It actually relaxes your body. It relaxes your parasympathetic nervous system. And I use this with my clients when they're nervous. And within 2 breaths, they're like, oh my God, I feel so relaxed. Now, you may not want to feel relaxed. You may not want to take care of yourself. So if you're resisting drinking the water, doing the breathing, do something else that is taking care of you. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about this morning, I come across these amazing videos on YouTube. I'm a YouTube watcher, and YouTube gives me suggestions. So today, a video popped up called Mother Hunger. There's a book called Mother Hunger. I just ordered it, but I love the way the author talks, so I'm going to listen to it on Audible. It's an 8-hour book. And she talks about how, there's this thing of frozen grief. Like people who have cancer, you go out and you help them because you see their grief. But people who didn't ever have proper mothering, you don't know that they're in pain. Their grief is frozen. And you may not know that you're in this kind of pain, but just having the word is a gateway to recognizing it. And you can heal your mother hunger. And she has the tips in her book, because mothering requires a good mother gives you nurturing, protection, and guidance. And because this comes down through the generations, there's some aspect of it that most of us didn't get, that we can give ourselves as adults. We can give ourselves the nurturing, protection, and guidance that we didn't get. And, like drinking enough water is one way of nurturing, speaking kindly to ourselves, deep breathing, being out in nature. Now, a lot of times mothers didn't give their kids nurturing, protection, and guidance because they just didn't know or they couldn't. For example, you have a mother who was told to let her baby cry it out because Dr. Spock said, don't spoil your child. And when children the first 3 years of life need constant nurturing, protection, and guidance from a caregiver. It doesn't actually have to be a mother. It could be a father, it could be a grandma, it could be an aunt, it could be your adopted mother. So don't make a story that, oh my God, my mom didn't love me, and I think people can get sidetracked by this poor me thing. The key is that you need that bonding, someone who's there for you, someone who is calm and peaceful and available on the inside, not anxious. And so when children are left to cry it out, see, crying is a fight response. Help me, help me. But when parents leave their kids alone in the crib to cry, in the thought of my child is left to soothe themselves, or maybe they're just tired, or they don't know any better, the children will dissociate and they will shut down, and it's kind of like their body goes into death mode, like no one's coming to save me, I'm going to die. They will stop crying, and it's not because they soothe themselves, they are incapable of it. It's because they dissociate and they shut down. Just notice if you're feeling anything about this in your body. Just notice it, what you didn't get. And they learn that, no one's there for me. At the same, it could be a mother that drops you off at 6 weeks at a daycare center. They found that children dropped off at daycare when they're only 6 weeks old, they have higher levels of cortisol in their saliva. They are, thank God, I didn't do that with my kids. I wasn't a perfect mom, but we had a family bed, and my ex-husband was mad at me for not going back to work, but I'm like, I'm not taking my kids to daycare. They need their parents. They need someone there for them. Okay. Because children will acclimate and develop a protective mechanism because they need their caretaker. They can't go anywhere. So they learn to adapt. And one way that children adapt is by shutting down and dissociating. And then they become adults who have a lot of health problems, autoimmune disorders, heart disease, eating disorders, all kinds of problems because their body is storing that pain. You don't see it. Outwardly, they act normal, but they're storing that pain. But the good news is you can heal all that by giving yourself what you didn't get. The body is meant to heal itself. So just learning about this is the first step. I want to talk about food here. Again, the book is Mother Hunger. Okay, so I'm also having coffee. So yummy. Okay, this is what's interesting about food, is that, okay, so say that you have a mother who is, she's either working a lot, or she died when you were little, she's ill, so she can't take care of you, or she's depressed. We're not even going to talk about the other category of, well, let's add that in. That's already bad enough, okay, because you were abandoned, and so other people are not safe or reliable. You don't have that experience. You had to learn to shut down and withdraw and take care of yourself and to dissociate. And that is a beautiful thing. That's how you learn to protect yourself. So just notice that. However, there's a third category, and that's called chronic PTSD. It's not like one thing happened, like you were in a war and you saw something, or you witnessed an accident. It's a chronic case of a caregiver that frightens you and terrifies you and hurts you. So that is chronic PTSD. Those people need a very special therapist who is trained in a lot of modalities. There aren't that many of them out there. I don't even know anyone who does that. But what happens is that the person that you're relying on to love you and guide you and feed you is also terrifying you. I can't even imagine what that would be like. That just sounds absolutely horrific. There are many people who grew up in this situation. The person that I'm counting on for my survival is also brutalizing and terrifying me. Ah, can't even, I can kind of feel a glimpse of that. Like the person I'm counting on is yelling at me. I can kind of feel that in my body, and all these things are going on. Because I know when I was little, sometimes my mom would yell at me, and that's already traumatizing. And I have a little bit of a mother wound because sometimes my mom would yell at me, and so I already have this little thing of like, I can't trust you or count on you because you can yell at me. And that's just real life, I know I yelled at my kids too. But that's very wounding to a child. That's why we have to do our own healing. But in these very severe cases, this is what happens with food. For for people, if you see all these people who turn to food for comfort, there is an attachment wound. This is what can happen. So you have a caregiver that neglects the child, but the milk is warm and soothing. Like, I don't like being hungry, but I love being fed. The food tastes so good, and now I'm full. So now what happens is I can't trust people, but I can trust food. People hurt me, but food comforts me. So then people develop this nurturing relationship with food. I can so easily see how it happens. I think we have to be compassionate for people who get their comfort from food because they didn't get it anywhere else. So, anyone hearing this who has a comfort relationship with food, this could be why. The other thing that can happen with food is anorexia, is that I don't need anything. I want nothing. I want nothing. Nothing, nothing, nothing. I'm not going to need anything. I'm not going to need anything. Okay, so that's on mother hunger. And another thing that came up listening in this video was about sexuality in girls. And I relate to this so much. So we're taught as women to be beautiful for men, and that men want us sexually, but good girls aren't sexual. We have these very conflicting messages. So it's confusing to us as women. On one hand, our sexuality gives us power because we start noticing in puberty that men start looking at us. And that's very powerful for a young girl to have these adult men noticing her and wanting her. And boys start wanting us. And it feels like, ooh, he must like me. He wants me. Because we are naturally empathetic and nourishing. Did you know that women have, I think, is it like 30 times more oxytocin receptors in our brain than men do? We are natural nurturers. So when a boy gives us attention, we feel it on a nurturing personal level. And then to just, then he wants sex with us and we like him, and maybe we're turned on by him, or maybe we just want to give him this thing because we like him. And then he has sex with us and runs off because he's just a young man exploring his hormones, and we don't know this about men. Or maybe he's just a predatory man, because some men don't have sex with girls and leave them, but there are men who do. I'm going to say that they're wounded men. It's maybe a little bit of a judgy thing on my part that they're wounded. So they see women as something to exploit. They don't notice that a woman has feelings, or they're uncomfortable with a woman's feelings. They're just seeing sex as something to exploit. They're not in touch with their hearts through the way that they had an absent father, or a father who philandered, or a father who told them that they should score. Maybe they have no empathy for women. They shut down their hearts and they dissociate it, and they're just seeking a feminine connection through their penis. Nonetheless, so girls, now their sexuality was abused, and that's painful to a woman. A woman who's in her heart and not dissociated is going to interpret this as pain. So there's this double-sided standard to our sexuality. Like, we're sexual beings, and a healthy sexual being wants to be sexual with a partner that she cares about and who cares about her. Yet, a lot of men will exploit women's sexuality, have sex with women and leave them, or judge women for sex they've had with other men. So sexuality can be, um, we're supposed to like it, but we're not supposed to like it. Like, we're supposed to be sexual, but not with the wrong guy, but we don't know if it's the wrong guy, and not too soon, but what is too soon? So there's a lot of mixed messages around sex. And, some men will be like, oh my God, you're too sexual for me. You didn't save your virginity for me. You're 30 and you've had so many men before me. Uh, I don't like that. Yet men aren't stepping up to marry women anymore like they used to. So sex is good and sex is bad, and there are all these mixed messages, and there's a lot of trauma around sexuality because, people were sexually abused, so they don't want sex at all, or they're over sexualized. So I think our planet needs a lot of healing. It needs sexual healing, it needs food healing, it needs love healing. So, just kind of being aware of some of these things, I think is really good. Then we also have whereas men may exploit women for sex to be like a trophy or to conquer women or to use women, deep down they're using women and discarding them. Women can also use men for money, or women can be love addicts where they're looking for a man to give them the love that they never got from their mom or their dad. They turn into like these stalkers, and they live in a fantasy. They attach very quickly to a man. They live in a fantasy of what a man could be rather than being embodied now in who this person really is. So there are a lot of really interesting things I'm coming across watching these YouTube videos, which are very fascinating. And they just remind me, that people need a lot of healing. And one more thing I want to add is we don't always know what people's pain is. See, a lot of people go around laughing and smiling, and it's a mask for their deep depression and sadness and pain. I look at people like Jackie Kennedy. Jackie O, she was smiling, she looked happy, but she was not. And Amber H, she uses seduction to pull people in. See, I think seduction and charm are big masks. And she was diagnosed as borderline personality disorder, which indicates to me a mother hunger, a mother wound. She was never capable of loving anyone, but she seduced people with her beauty and her charm. So I think we have to be very, very careful. If you see a man or a woman who's extremely good looking and charming or seductive, run. Just run. That's what I've come to believe, because it's a mask. And one thing to be aware of, I think, if you're dating someone or early dating someone or getting to know someone, look out for these things. Is this person really being vulnerable? And is one of you rushing things? Is one of you rushing things? Because a healthy friendship or relationship is not rushing. You can easily go days between dates. If you feel this obsessive need to be with this person that you don't even know, or they have this obsessive need to be with you, that's a red flag. And I'm guessing in those love bombing relationships, it's fast, furious, and intense. And that is a signal. I want you to have see, when people get into these toxic relationships, they don't know what they're doing. They're just swept in. And I think what's really helpful is waking people up or seeing what the red flags are, because people don't know. They're like, oh, this feels so good. But when it feels so good so fast, you've got to raise some red flags. And while it is possible for people to have love at first sight, just have those red flags and ask your friends, ask your therapist, ask your family what they think. Because if you feel like this rush and this need to be with this person, that's a red flag. That's not healthy. That's an obsession. That's an obsession. That isn't love. That's like an obsession with the fantasy of the person. A lot of times people fall in love with the fantasy because, see, if someone never had a healthy caregiver, they don't know how to relate to a real person, to bond and be intimate with the real person. They only know how to be intimate with the fantasy. So if you get easily bored with your partner because you're not comfortable being intimate with a real person, you've never experienced that, because as a child your caregiver wasn't reliable, and so you bonded with a fantasy, or you had a fantasy. So you can only bond with a fantasy, like a celebrity, or like a porn girl, or the next new person, because you don't want to know a real person. You can only bond with the fantasy. That's how you end up with these people that stalk someone that they just met, or they're constantly obsessing and stalking. I watched a video about female love addicts recently from the Center for Healthy Sex, and it sounds horrible what these women go through, and they don't even realize that they're obsessing over someone. They just think this is real. They think they're in love with this guy that they only met a couple times, and they're stalking him or buying a house across the street from him to watch him all the time. That isn't love. That is like a sickness. So you got to catch yourself between, am I having an intimate relationship with a real person, or am I just obsessing? Like those women that fall for the catfishers online, they're bonding to a fantasy. See, they all have like attachment disorders. They haven't experienced bonding to a real person. So here's some good things to help you on this. Is make friends of the same sex. Make friends of the same sex and start realizing how you interact and show up and are intimate with your same-sex friends, and then how that translates to opposite-sex friends. Also, I'm not sure if women can be friends with men. I think in some situations it's possible, but I've also known situations where men will be friendly with the woman. Maybe they're coupled and they're friendly with the woman, and not everything, the couples are friends, there's nothing going on. And then, as soon as the woman is divorced, it turns out the guy wanted to fuck her all along. Because some guys are like, some guys would be like, I'll fuck her if I could, but I can't, so I'm going to be well behaved. So I know there are people who say that women can be friends with men, but I don't think they understand men, because men are so visual, and even though they won't do anything because they are keeping healthy boundaries, the moment the woman would be up for it, they would be, oh yeah, I would have been gone for it all along. I just think the only men that I would ever want to be friends with that aren't a lover would be like a gay man. I really, really don't trust men to just be friends with me. I really don't, because they always want my body, because it's cute. They can't help it. And it feels unsafe to me that I'm with someone who's constantly wanting something from me. I can feel that. Maybe I'm just guarded. I don't know. I think I feel it. So I don't want to be friends with men. I'm fine working with them or being friends with them on LinkedIn. But, I've just experienced too many times where I thought a guy was a friend, but all along he wanted something more. And I think a lot of women are just asleep to that. It's just my opinion. Anyway, drop your comments. I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope you have a wonderful Sunday, and thank you for watching.